All right, let's stay with issues around the United Kingdom and tourism and travel bans. There are reports that the Indian government has decided to impose reciprocal restrictions on UK nationals arriving in the country. The new regulations will come into effect from October the 4th, reportedly. The UK considers Indians vaccinated with locally made Astrazeneca shots unvaccinated. Let's get more on this with SABC News correspondent in New Delhi, Neha Poonia. A very good evening to Neha. Just explain to us what's happening there.
Good evening. Well, this is something that the Indian government and the British government have been engaging on for several weeks, and they've been sparring over what this essentially means. But now it's escalating into a diplomatic spat of sorts, because what India has now done is it's essentially imposed the very same restrictions that the UK is imposing on Indian travelers, on UK travelers who will arrive in India starting next week on the very same day that UK's own travel restrictions kick in. This means that fully vaccinated UK travelers will be considered unvaccinated. They'll have to quarantine for 10 days. They'll have to test before they fly, test on arrival, and also test at the end of their 10-day isolation period. The government says this is a reciprocal measure it was forced to take. Sources in the Indian government say that they've been engaging with the UK on this for a while now. They've lodged an official protest as well, and that India is well within its rights to take these steps as well.
Neha, just explain to us how different would these steps be compared to what had to happen before they were implemented?
They say the devil is in the details, and that really is the perspective you need here, because most critics agree that these new rules India has imposed on UK travellers aren't very different from what British nationals were undergoing if they were coming to India prior to this anyway. They were anyway required to test before they boarded the flight, test upon arrival, and test at the end of an isolation period, which was about 7 days, and then continue to monitor their health for another week as well. But most travelers I spoke to tell me that these rules weren't very strictly enforced. So I think what we're now seeing is more diplomatic posturing, India taking what is what looks like a very hard stance, because there's a lot of outrage here in the country. Many people calling the British government's move to not recognize fully vaccinated Indians as racist, because Covishield, which is the vaccine which has been given to 90% of all Indians, is essentially AstraZeneca but made here under a license, and it's also a vaccine that India sent 5 million doses of to the UK a few months ago, and that consignment was then used in the UK's own vaccination program at home. So many people are calling this hypocrisy and saying that this smacks of a colonial mindset.
All right, Neha, so one of the reports that I'm reading is that those tests are very similar before and after these steps, but what may be new is a day 8 COVID-19 test for visitors from the United Kingdom to India. What if people don't stay for 8 days? How effective may this be? And will the diplomatic message get through just by saying we're going to impose reciprocal restrictions?
Could you repeat that, please?
Sure, not a problem. One of the reported new steps that are being implemented by India is that on day 8, UK travellers arriving in India must do another COVID-19 test, which they didn't have to do before. Some people are saying this may not be effective beyond posturing, because people can stay for a week and then leave. And do you think the message is going to get through diplomatically just because they are choosing to impose those reciprocal restrictions?
I think this is a game of optics, isn't it? Because, I mean, India and UK are historically very close partners. They've been talking about enhancing bilateral ties in the aftermath of Brexit. And India has so far not taken any public measures to retaliate against what it has openly called a discriminatory policy. But in this messaging, it's clearly telling the UK that even though its measures might not be very different from what it was doing just a few days ago, it is willing to to up the ante, and that's really, according to experts, a pressure tactic perhaps to remind the UK also that India is also a vaccine manufacturing powerhouse. It's the world's largest manufacturer of vaccines. It plans to start exporting vaccines to the world once again this month. So it's also trying to pull its own weight and remind the UK that it's not a country that the British government can take lightly. And yes, while the semantics of what is being done now are slightly different, like I've been saying, most people agree this is not very different from what British nationals were already facing. So it's less about the details and what changes and on what day they now have to do a final test to get released from self-isolation, because it's not institutional quarantine, which is also important to remember, because it's not going to be officially enforced. It's something that you have to ensure yourself. So the question then is, how do you monitor the people who are coming in, and how committed is India to enforcing these rules?
Neha Poonia giving us an update from New Delhi, India. Thanks so much for your time on SABC News this evening. SABC correspondent Neha Poonia there.